Urban renewal was Negro removal. The Shaw community came about with because of my brother, really, working with the Model Inner City Community Organization. That's when they determined the Shaw community, the boundaries. He took the experience with Southwest, the renewal of Southwest, to Shaw, and said, look, if you're going to renew the place, let's do it with the people who live there. And that's what they've done. The churches built much of what has gone on in the Shaw community. The Catholic Church built, Daddy Grace's church built, in our church, indeed, built a New Bethel, built a building at 9th and Rhode Island Avenue, so that where people who lived in the community can still live in the community. I grew up on a street, one is a street between 9th and 10th Street on Westminster. What always impressed me were the people around. In our block, 2 houses from me, was a teacher. Across the street from him was a doctor. Up the street from several houses up the street, Scurlock had family, and Scurlock is one of the prominent black photographers in the world. And so it was a place where you grew up among people who had achieved, and you knew that if I do what's right, I can do what they did, or even better. And that's what we as Tuskegee Airmen, very frankly, are trying to do now, to make kids understand that they can be better than we were. And those people in the block, in fact, I got a letter from the teacher to recommend me to go in the Army, and that's the kind of thing that you grew up with. And then you were so proud of what went on U Street. As I said, U Street was our Broadway. The theaters were there. On Easter Sunday, people came from all over the city just to walk down U Street in their new stuff on Easter. On Halloween, the same thing, except that they were coming to show their costumes and stuff. And like I said, there were 3 theaters on U Street: the Booker T up at 15th in U, the Republic between 13th and 14th, and then the Lincoln Theater. At 7th and T, it was Dunbar Theater, and then right down the street was the Howard Theater. So that a lot of the entertainment that went on in the Negro community or black community was in that area. There were other areas that had things like Benning Road out in Southeast, Sheriff Road out in Maryland, places like that. But U Street was the hub.
My first work day in D.C. was June 1st, 1986. I was hired as the director of community organizing for St. Augustine's Roman Catholic Church. And the church had a history of being an activist and organizing church, especially in the black community in D.C. The type of work that I was doing in Shaw at 14th and U and 14th and V in the 1980s was related to organizing in senior citizen buildings. So I was trying to stop this displacement among seniors all along the 14th Street corridor, New Hampshire Avenue, and the U Street corridor. But the other thing that I did that was unique to my work, while I was at St. Augustine's, I also worked with the 14th and U Street Coalition. It was a coalition of tenant associations, individual members, churches, small businesses, and even ANC leaders. So it saw itself as a conduit to bring people together around issues that dealt with future development in D.C. along the 14th Street corridor, especially the vacant land at 14th and U. It saw itself as a conduit to organize the small business owners to make sure the change in the neighborhood benefit them. But the biggest thing that the 14th and U Street Coalition wanted to see done was the preservation of the history, the culture, and the housing of the people that lived in the neighborhood. And so, in order to do that, they were involved with the Reeves Center development at 14th and U, which was and is one of the first government buildings built in the neighborhood. So they did that to create jobs for the community, but also at the same time, they worked with the developer to build 32 units of very low-cost housing called the Gino Baroni Apartments, after Gino Baroni, who was a former pastor at St. Augustine's Church. But the flip side of that is other people who control land in the neighborhood and who had a lot of money saw that as opportunity to actually continue development, but it wasn't what we call equitable development. So we define equitable development as the development of people and place. So what's important about that is when you don't put the emphasis on the development of people, then the change really can become, like I said earlier, an economic and land grab tsunami that displaces the longtime residents, right? I was the first executive director of the Moulden Community Development Corporation, and our mission was to focus on building power among tenant association, building powers among the churches and the shelters, and then nurturing the business leaders in the community. Manor Community Development Corporation was the predecessor organization as we transitioned to One DC, which stands for Organizing Neighborhood Equity. So we transitioned from what they call a neighborhood-based community development corporation because Manor CDC was based in Shaw and the focus was Shaw, DC. So we transitioned from that to a citywide community organizing collective that looked at all of DC as a place where we should be organizing for economic and racial equity around housing and land, health and wellness, and income and jobs. If you walk along 7th Street, 90% of the people of color, Black, Latino, or immigrant people that you see coming out of those buildings was because actually we used a government grant to organize the residents in those buildings. In several of those buildings, we were able to help people buy the buildings, which is part of the structural change, right? That they went from renters to owners of community controlled property, or what we call limited equity co-ops, right? And so that happened at 1337th Street, and it happened at the Martin Luther King Latino Co-op at 11th and M, right? So we learned from organizing along 7th Street that we could do this work in other parts of Shaw, but also throughout the District of Columbia.